You've been carrying a story about yourself for so long that you forgot it was a story. You wake up, and there you are, the same person who went to sleep. You look in the mirror, and there's the face that's been yours since you can remember having a face at all. You move through your day, making choices, feeling things, wanting things, and every single moment confirms it. You are you, and you have always been you, and you will be you tomorrow. It feels so obvious that you never think to question it. But what if the most obvious thing about your life was also the least true? Not true in the sense that you're being lied to by someone else. True in the sense that the story wrote itself so well, so seamlessly, that even you, the one it's supposedly about, never noticed it was being written at all. Think about this morning. You woke up, and within seconds the whole architecture assembled itself. Thoughts about what you need to do today, feelings left over from yesterday, the low hum of worry or anticipation or tiredness, and underneath all of it, so quiet you'd never name it out loud, the feeling that all of this is happening to you, that there's a center point, a location where experience is landing. You don't decide to feel that way. You don't wake up and think, okay, time to be a self again. It's already there, already operating, the moment awareness turns on. And because it's always there, because it's been there every single time you've ever checked, you assume it's real. You assume it's the ground everything else is built on. But what if it isn't the ground? What if it's just another thing appearing on the ground? No more solid than the thoughts, no more permanent than the feeling of being tired. Here's the edge of it. You can't actually find the thing you've been calling you. Not because you're looking in the wrong place, not because you're not spiritual enough or awake enough or paying close enough attention, but because the separate self isn't a thing that can be found. It's a story that experience tells about itself over and over until the story feels like the only thing that was ever true. You reach for a glass of water. There's the hand moving, the muscles tightening, the glass lifting, the coolness in your mouth. Somewhere in all of that, the feeling arises, I am doing this. But where is the I? Not in the hand is just moving. Not in the thought, I'm thirsty. The thought is just appearing, the same way a cloud appears in the sky. Not in the sensation of control, because that sensation is just another sensation, no different than the coolness of the water. So where is it? You've been building that I out of memory, out of continuity, out of the fact that your body has stayed recognizable and your thoughts have stayed mostly coherent. You've stitched together 1,000 moments of experience into a single character and called that character you. And the stitchwork is so fine, so consistent, that it's invisible. You don't see the stitching, you only see the character. But the character isn't what's real. The stitching isn't what's real. What's real is the raw fact that experience is happening, that there is seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, that awareness is present, and everything you've ever known has appeared inside that awareness, including the story of the one it's all supposedly happening to. This isn't an attack. It's not meant to make you feel small or lost or like your life doesn't matter. It's the opposite. Because if the separate self is just a story, a beautiful, intricate, completely convincing story, then what you actually are is the space in which that story appears. And that space has no edges. It was never born. It will never die. It's here right now, holding every word you're reading, and it's the same space that was here when you were 5 years old, staring at the ceiling before sleep, wondering what it meant to be alive. You've been looking for yourself in the story, and the story kept pointing back at the story. But the one looking was never in the story to begin with. Let's go back to something simple. You're sitting somewhere right now, reading these words. Maybe there's a screen in front of you. Maybe there's sound in the background, a fan, distant traffic, someone moving in another room. Maybe your body feels a certain way, tense, relaxed, a little restless, a little still. All of that is here. None of it is in question. But now ask, where is the edge between you and the room? You might say, my body is the edge. The room is out there, I'm in here. But look closer. The feeling of your body sitting is a sensation appearing in awareness. The sight of the room is an image appearing in awareness. The thought, I am in here, the room is out there, is another appearance, no more solid than the image of the room itself. So where exactly does you end and not you begin? You can't find the line, because there isn't one. There's just experience appearing all at once, and the story that some of it belongs to a self and some of it doesn't. But the story is optional. It's not written into the structure of things. It's a habit, the deepest, oldest, most automatic habit you have, but it's still just a habit. And when the habit loosens, even for a second, everything changes and nothing changes at all. You're still here, still breathing, still reading these words. But the felt sense that you're a separate fragment inside a larger world, that sense softens. The borders start to feel less like walls and more like chalk lines drawn on the ground, useful in their way, but not actually dividing anything. You've probably had moments where this was already true, where the sense of being a separate self just wasn't there. Not because you worked for it or deserved it, but because the conditions were right and the story paused for a breath. Maybe you were looking at something beautiful, light coming through trees, the way water moves, the face of someone you love. And for a few seconds, there was no gap between the seeing and the seen. No you having an experience of beauty, just beauty happening. Or maybe you were completely absorbed in something, making something with your hands, running until your legs burned, reading a book that pulled you so far in you forgot you were reading. And in the middle of that absorption, the narrator went quiet. There was just the doing, the making, the motion, and no one standing apart from it saying, "Look, I'm the one doing this." Or maybe, and this is the one people talk about least because it sounds too simple to mean anything, you were doing something utterly ordinary, washing a dish, walking down a hallway, breathing in the middle of the night when you couldn't sleep. And the sheer fact of existence, the raw there-ness of being, filled everything, and the question of who was experiencing it didn't even arise. In all of those moments, the story of the separate self paused. Not because you were special, not because you meditated for 10,000 hours or read the right book or had the right insight, but because the story is just a story, and stories pause all the time. They pause when you stop feeding them. They pause when your attention moves somewhere else. They pause when the present moment is so full, so immediate, that there's no room left for the narrator to narrate. And in the pause, you don't disappear. The world doesn't disappear. What disappears is the sense that you were ever separate from it. But then, and this is the part no one warns you about, the story comes back. The narrator wakes up. You have a thought about the moment you just had, and the thought says, "I just experienced something profound, and now the separation is back because there's an I claiming the experience, making it into a possession, a memory, a trophy. And you feel like you lost something, like you fell out of grace, like you have to work your way back to that place where the self was gone. But you didn't lose anything. Because the place where the self was gone isn't a place. It's what's already here, underneath the story, all the time. The story just got loud again, that's all. And the loudness of the story doesn't make it more real. It just makes it harder to notice that it's a story. Here's the thing. The separate self is useful. It's not a mistake. It's not something you're supposed to destroy or transcend or rise above. It's the way experience organizes itself so you can move through the world without walking into walls or forgetting your own name. It's the reason you can say, "I'm hungry," and go make food, instead of just standing in the kitchen marveling at the fact that hunger is happening somewhere in the field of awareness. The story of you is a tool, an incredibly effective tool. The problem is that you've been using the tool for so long, you started to think the tool was the user. You pick up a pen, and the pen helps you write, but you don't look at the pen and think, "This pen is me." You know the pen is an object you're using. The sense of being a separate self is the same. It's something awareness uses to navigate experience. But awareness itself, the open, edgeless space in which thoughts and sensations and stories appear, is what you actually are. And that awareness was never small. It was never born. It was never in danger. You've been trying to protect something that was never under threat. You've been trying to improve something that was never broken. You've been trying to become something you've been the entire time. So what changes when you see through the story? Not in a conceptual way, not as a nice idea you agree with, but as a lived recognition that shows up in the middle of your actual life. Here's what doesn't change. You still have preferences. You still get tired. You still feel pain when you stub your toe and joy when someone you love laughs at something you said. The story of being a person doesn't vanish. The character keeps walking around, making choices, having opinions, moving through time. But the grip on the character loosens. The feeling that you are only the character, that the story is the whole truth of what you are, starts to relax. And in that relaxation, something softens. The constant background hum of self-concern, the need to defend and improve and justify and preserve the character, gets quieter. Not because you worked to make it quiet, but because you saw that the thing you were protecting was never as solid as you thought. You still act, you still care, you still try to do good work and be kind and figure out what matters. But the weight of it shifts. Because if the self is just a story, then failure doesn't threaten your existence. Success doesn't complete you. Other people's opinions don't define you, and your own opinions don't trap you. The whole structure of me versus the world starts to feel less like a fact and more like a game you're playing. A game you can play well or badly, or with a sense of humor, but never a game you have to win to prove you're real. Think about a moment when you were genuinely afraid. Not the background anxiety that hums along all day, but real fear. The kind that floods your body and makes your heart kick against your ribs. In that moment, the fear is total. It fills everything. There's no room for anything else. But even in the middle of the fear, something is noticing the fear. Something is aware that fear is happening. And that something, the awareness itself, isn't afraid. It can't be afraid because fear is an object appearing in it, the same way a wave appears in the ocean. The ocean doesn't drown in the wave. The ocean holds the wave, and when the wave passes, the ocean is still there, unchanged. You are not the wave. You are not the fear, or the joy, or the thought, or the story of the self that claims to own all of those things. You are the ocean, the still, silent, ever-present space in which all of it appears and disappears over and over without ever leaving a mark. And the deepest grief of human life, deeper than any personal loss, deeper than any failure, is the grief of mistaking yourself for the wave, of spending your whole life trying to keep the wave from crashing, when the wave was always going to crash, because that's what waves do. And the whole time, you were the ocean, safe, whole, unbroken. But here's where it gets tricky, because the mind, the same mind that built the story of the separate self in the first place, will try to take this insight and turn it into a new story, a better story, a more spiritual story. It will say, I am not the self, I am awareness. I am the ocean, not the wave. I have seen through the illusion. And now the illusion has just shifted. Now there's a me who is enlightened, who has the right understanding, who is no longer fooled by the small self. The character has just upgraded its script. The story got more sophisticated, but it's still a story. And the new story is even harder to see through, because it's wearing the costume of truth. This is why the insight has to stay alive, has to stay fresh, has to be met again and again in the present moment, instead of becoming a belief you carry around. Because the moment you turn it into a belief, you've created a new self, the self who knows there's no self, and that self is just as limiting as the old one, maybe more so, because now you think you've arrived somewhere, and arrival is just another way of staying asleep. The truth isn't a destination. It's not a state you reach and then get to keep. It's the simple, immediate, ever-present fact that experience is happening, and the sense of being a separate someone to whom it's happening is a story layered on top. And the story is fine, it's useful, it's even beautiful in its way. But when you mistake the story for the totality of what you are, you suffer. Because the story is always under threat. The story can fail. The story can be rejected, humiliated, diminished, erased. And if you think you are the story, then every threat to the story feels like a threat to your existence. But you are not the story. You were never the story. And nothing that happens to the story, no success, no failure, no praise, no blame, touches what you actually are. So where does that leave you? On a regular Tuesday, when the insight isn't blazing and the sense of separation is back and you still have to go to work and pay your bills and deal with the same people who annoyed you yesterday. It leaves you here, right here, in the middle of the ordinary, where the sacred has always been hiding. The separate self isn't real, but the life it organizes is. The story isn't true, but the love inside the story is. The character isn't what you are, but the kindness that moves through the character, the grief that cracks it open, the joy that lights it up. All of that is the ocean moving as the wave. The awareness taking shape as experience. The infinite appearing as the specific, finite, tender, breakable life you're living. You don't have to get rid of the self. You just have to stop believing it's all you are. And when you stop believing that, not as a concept, but as a lived shift in the way you meet your life, something opens. The grip loosens, the borders soften. The sense that you're inside your head, looking out at a world that's separate and other and often hostile, starts to dissolve. And in its place is something so simple it almost sounds disappointing. You're here. Just here. Not as a location, not as a self, but as the open, aware space in which location and self and everything else appears. And in that space, there's no problem to solve. There never was. The whole project of becoming someone better, someone more complete, someone finally at peace, that project was based on the belief that you were broken to begin with. But you were never broken. The story of being broken was just another part of the story, and the story is beautiful and painful and achingly human. But it's not the truth. The truth is that you are the space in which the story appears, and the space is vast and still and utterly without fear, because there's nothing in it that can be threatened, nothing that can be lost, nothing that was ever at stake. You've been looking for yourself in the mirror, but the mirror only shows the character. The one looking at the mirror was never in the reflection. You've been trying to find yourself in your thoughts, but thoughts are just weather passing through. The sky doesn't become the storm. You've been trying to locate yourself in your body, but the body is just another sensation appearing and disappearing in the same field of awareness that holds the thought, "This is my body." So where are you? You're here, right here, not as a location, but as the fact of presence itself, the still, silent, open knowing in which every word you've just read appeared, the awareness that was here before the first word and will be here after the last, the space that holds your whole life, your whole history, every thought you've ever had and every feeling you've ever felt, without ever being touched by any of it. You are that space. You have always been that space. And the separate self, the one who was so sure it was in control, so afraid of failing, so desperate to be seen and loved and understood, was just a story that space told itself, because stories are how love takes form in time. The story isn't a lie. It's a love letter, written by the infinite to the infinite, in the only language the finite can understand. And now, in this moment, the infinite is reading the letter back to itself and remembering, I was never only this. I was never separate. I was never alone. You are not the wave. You are not the story. You are the ocean, appearing as the wave, telling itself a story so beautiful, so convincing, that it forgot it was the ocean. But you can't forget forever, because the ocean is still here. It was here the whole time, and every moment of your life, every joy, every grief, every mistake, every triumph, every quiet morning and every hard night has been the ocean, waking up to itself, one wave at a time. You are still here, still breathing, still reading these words. And in the space between this sentence and the next, there's a silence. In that silence, no story is being told, no self is being constructed. There's just the raw fact of awareness holding everything, including the thought that it's not enough. But it is enough. It was always enough. And the one who needed to know that was never separate from the knowing. If you stayed with this all the way to the end, write this sentence in the comments in your own words as something you've just realized. The story of being separate was never the whole truth of what I am. Let it be something you say as yourself now in this moment, as a gift you give back to the silence that's been holding you this entire time. And if something here moved in you, if something shifted, even just a little, let one of the videos on your screen hold you for a while longer. Because this isn't the end of the conversation. It's just the place where the words stop and the living begins.